today's episode of the Brains Byte Back podcast, we speak with Austin Yavorsky, CEO and co-founder of the Landian Metaverse, a decentralized metaverse creating spaces for the community to experience a new level of immersive encounters. During this episode, Austin shares how the company is working with a forward-thinking healthcare group to help patients with post-traumatic stress disorder by allowing them to relive some of their trauma in a VR environment. He shares how this work was carried out and some of the fascinating results that have come from it. And additionally, he also shares what else excites him the most about the metaverse. I hope you enjoy.
My name is Austin Yavorsky. I'm the CEO of the Landian Metaverse. We were founded in 2019. Currently have about 250 employees here in Medellin, Colombia, with offices in Dubai and Madrid as well. I myself have been in the crypto space for a very long time. So I started one of the first exchanges in the world back end of 2011, beginning of 2012 in Central America. And from there went on to do a lot of really interesting blockchain projects, starting originally in sort of environmental protection associated with storing very interesting data on the Ethereum blockchain at the beginning, and then ended up moving over to Europe and continuing a lot of that work afterwards, as well as doing a lot of legislative review and assistance with some of the new crypto laws that were being written at the time, which was about 2015, 2016, as well as some of the sort of AML KYC protocols that were originally developed for exchanges as a whole. So myself and my partners have been at it for quite some time and found some of the pitfalls associated with some of the other metaverses out there and decided to try and fix them.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for joining me today. I'm super excited about this. And it sounds like you really have quite an extensive history in this space. And I'd love to know, when and how did Landian first start?
Yeah, so Landian was born as an idea in 2018, give or take. I had personally done a bit of advisory work for some of the early metaverses. I was a consultant for Decentralized in their gaming division, Vegas City, when that was originally launched. And I had seen a lot of the issues that they were having with the speed of the Ethereum blockchain, as well as some of the graphics hindrances that were built around the issues related to some of the NFTs and running on IPFS. So we decided that we were going to take a deep dive to try and see not only how we could make a better metaverse, but effectively one that was actually useful. And a lot of the early things that had happened back around that period of time, it was very, experimental. There were some interesting things going on around the concepts, but we had never really seen a proper use case where either A, someone would spend a considerable amount of time in the metaverse, or B, they would use it for something other than speculative investments. So we set out to effectively create something that was functional, usable, that you could spend a decent amount of time in, and that both individuals and businesses would find a benefit of either adding it to their existing sort of repertoire of tools that they had, or complementing some of the other things that were out there.
Fantastic. Well, it definitely sounds like there was a genuine need for this. And I'm really curious to know, why the name Landian?
Yeah, we had researched a bunch of different ones, but we wanted it to feel like a place where everyone was a member. And everyone represented the space itself. And at the end of the day, we're all humans. We all live in one particular place, and we decided to try and give it something that seemed familiar, but also felt like it was part of a whole.
Yeah, I suppose I definitely from that get the idea of land and I don't know, metaverse. Anyway, I like the name. It's a good choice of name, and I also want to change the subject slightly. Because I know or I understand that you do a lot of work in the healthcare space. And a few years ago, a very forward-thinking healthcare group approached you to see if you and your team could help some of their patients with post-traumatic stress disorder by allowing them to relive some of their trauma in a VR environment. Now, I personally find this really interesting with a background in psychology myself. Can you share how this work was carried out and what some of the results that have come from it?
For For sure. So we have a lot of different clients. In general, we do things for governments, for militaries, for healthcare, for educational institutions, universities, you name it. So a lot of the opportunity with most of the clients really just comes at the discretion of them trying to understand how they can leverage the metaverse and use it for different things. So we've been working a lot in the healthcare and wellness space. Originally, we had a couple of customers that were working with us to try and create sort of guided meditation simulations and things of that nature, where we were trying to effectively put people into better states of consciousness, whether it be for very short periods of time throughout the day to try and increase their overall mental wellness, or if they were going to use it for therapeutic. And throughout that process, we were actually approached by a couple of different groups to do a series of experiments. One of the most interesting ones is the one that you mentioned, which was talking to people that had PTSD and seeing how the metaverse and VR environments as a whole could effectively help them either cope with the trauma or slowly relive it in a way that was amicable without causing too much stress. So what was quite interesting about that was that in the beginning, I personally wasn't entirely sure what was going to happen. And I was actually a little bit afraid that there were going to be too many instances of trauma by creating some of these environments. And you have to keep in mind, a lot of these patients are war veterans. Some of them have dealt with things like sexual abuse, so on and so forth. So some of these environments are pretty extreme in terms of what actually happens. So the ultimate outcome for us was really overall and just absolutely incredible. A lot of these people went from taking 5, 6, 7 different types of antidepressants and things like that, all the way down to just a handful or none after a relatively short period of time. So it was conducted in 60-day, 120-day, and 1-year markers, with reliving each of those. And throughout that process, we did a lot of interesting things. So we were monitoring biometric response, everything from pupil dilation to heart rate to blood pressure. At one point, there was a EKG hooked up to one of the patients, and we went through that entire experience, and it was really, really stunning. But for me, it was just an example of how VR environments can be used for good, and just out of the box thinking in general to try and come up with solutions that otherwise wouldn't be possible in the physical world.
That's a fascinating result. And it's funny because when I first found out about this work that you did, that was my initial reaction. I was like, oh my word, that must be so stressful to be put back into that kind of environment. So I was so curious to know like how that turned out. And it's fantastic to hear that it is had such a positive impact. And kind of on that note of positive impacts in a way, I suppose, I really want to know what else excites you the most when it comes to the metaverse.
Yeah, so I really like a lot of the work that we do in healthcare and wellness because you do get to see results relatively fast. Studies like the one that I was just talking about, we're doing things like that right now with different countries where they're also implementing things like psychedelics and psilocybin, so on and so forth, to try and help speed those processes along. So there's a bit of a combination of different tools that are being used, which I think is very, very useful. I like a lot of the work that we do in muscle memory training. So this is anything from sports to military simulations. So we get to train people hundreds, if not thousands of times, how to do something that could either be incredibly important for their career, or could be a life or death situation. So you get to sort of have people live that experience over and over and over again before they actually have to do it for real. But I think the thing that excites me the most is the work that we do for overall extended learning and universities in general. So this is everything from remote education all the way down to customer service training, extended corporate training, so on and so forth. And the reason that excites me is because the metaverse and those training simulations have shown time and time again that people are not only absorbing, but they're retaining a lot more knowledge than they would in classroom environments and otherwise. And I think the bulk of the reason there is because they're ultra focused on what happens within that space while they're doing it. And so I think that's quite important. But in general, opening up the world of education to the entire world without any boundaries associated with distance, costs associated with anything, and a lot of the different knowledge that can be shared amongst those communities. That gets really, really excited because we get to use these tools as sort of the next iteration of learning with the expanse of the internet and open it up to the entire world all at once. So we're quite excited about that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something to be excited about. And I love what you said there about training individuals for future events or just generally. I think this is such an interesting technology to use for training purposes. It might not necessarily be a direct parallel, but I recently had a conversation with a surgeon and they were talking about how VR and the metaverse can also be used to help train surgeons. And I find that really fascinating as well. And I mean, there's so many use cases. There's a huge rabbit hole you can go down. And I do know that you mentioned there, like you'd love working in the healthcare space, but like what else is on the horizon for you folks at Landian?
Yeah, so we get bigger every day. We have our own internal team that works directly with our clients, but Landian's being built as a platform. So ultimately, the work that we're doing, these are effectively, we call them hero projects, and very large scale use cases of what can and can't be done within that space. So the thing that's next for us is really opening up these tools to the entire world and giving people their own ability to either build whatever they'd like, work with different clients, work on different solutions for everyday problems that you otherwise would have issues doing in a physical world. And what we're really, looking forward to over the next year or so is getting that community engaged, providing them with all of the things that they need to do the work that they want to do. And I'm excited to see what they built because, your imagination is unbounded inside of these spaces. And as soon as we give everyone the tools to go out there and conquer, we don't know what we're going to see. So we're really, really looking forward to seeing what the community brings to us as opposed to us bringing it to the community.
Well, it's certainly very exciting to say the least, and I think you got some great things lined up there. And if people do want to keep up with the work that you're doing or get involved, even, what is the best way for them to do that, Austin?
Yeah, you can find us online at landian.io. We have Telegram channels, we have Twitter spaces, so on and so forth. So your standard channels, but landian.io is where you can find the bulk of our work.
Growing a company has many hurdles, from securing funding to expanding your business capabilities to ranking better on search. Each business challenge is uniquely complex. The solution to these challenges is growth-focused digital PR and marketing, and that is where our sponsor Publicize comes in. Publicize sets itself apart from traditional PR companies. It does not charge large retainers or churns out press releases whether you've got a newsworthy announcement or not. Publicize builds businesses' online presence and gets high-quality PR and media coverage for startups and entrepreneurs who are priced out of a broken PR industry. What's more, listeners of Brains Byte Back can find the tools and resources they need to overcome common hurdles that many startups face when trying to generate long-term growth by visiting publicize.co/BBB. That's publicize.co/BBB. That is it for today's episode. Thank you for joining us. I hope you've learned something, and if you have benefited from today's episode, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcast, as these reviews really help us grow the show. You can also follow us wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. Just search Brains Byte Back and you will find us. We hope you join us for more episodes in the future, and until then, take care. Disclosure: this episode contained a client of an Espacio portfolio company.